Welcome to What's the Story, a podcast where I get to chat to everyday people about their stories of faith and courage. And today I'm chatting with my very good friend Dave Connolly about growing up in the 60s in Toxteth, Liverpool, how robbing his brother led to him to becoming a Christian, how he dealt with his nephew being murdered, and what it's like to lead a church. So much to get into in this conversation with Dave. But before we do that, one of the things I love to do is just to give you a few more episodes to sort of have a listen to, just in case you've not got enough from today. So why not check out Learning How to Forgive Totally Changed My Life by my wife, Sharon Edmondson. She did that talk. That's on the Crowd Church website. And also How Do I Resist Evil, which you did, Dave, actually, part of the Alpha series, which was also great. You can find both of these episodes and our entire archive of episodes and live streams on our website for free at www.crowd.church. And whilst you're there, be sure to sign up for our newsletter, and each week we will email you these links along with the notes and links from today's conversation with Dave. It comes direct to your inbox, totally free. Totally amazing. Now, this episode is brought to you by Crowd Online Church. Dave, you know as well as I do that not everybody wants to go to church, and not everybody can even get into a church building. And that's where online church works super well. It's a safe space to explore the Christian faith. And the thing that I love about Crowd Church is that you get to join in and shape the conversation, as they don't just talk at you. Oh no. So if you've never been to church before, or if you're looking for a new church, do check out Crowd Church. The website is www.crowd.church, or you can email me directly at matt@crowd.church with any questions. I would love to answer them for you. Now, Dave Connolly is one of my longest standing friends. He is the co-founding pastor of Frontline Church in Liverpool. Until recently, he was a pastor of Toxteth Tabernacle, and now he spends most of his time supporting church leaders, pastoring the pastors, as well as hanging out with his amazing and beautiful wife and family. You've got Julie, you've got copious amounts of grandkids. Dave, welcome to What's the Story. It's great to finally have this conversation.
Absolutely. Great to be with you,
now,
Matt.
There we go. Sorry, I just had you on mute there for a second. Yeah, no, you're back now, you're fine. That's what we call professionalism, ladies and gentlemen, forgetting to unmute the mute button. So, it's great to have you. So, you have been in Liverpool all your life, right? Born and bred Liverpool?
Yeah, born and bred in Toxteth.
So, for those outside of Liverpool, and maybe outside of people who knew what happened in the 80s, tell the world what's it like growing up in Toxteth?
I think growing up in Toxteth is probably like growing up in the centre of any inner city. And culture, especially being a seaport, there's great copious amounts of money in different areas and great poverty at the same time. Great music culture, great creativity. Today, it's just called different things than what it was. I was born in 1957, so I don't remember anything of the 50s really, or the 70s or the 80s, but that's a different story.
Yeah.
So I grew up in the 60s, and for me, life was, like most of the people in Toxteth, it was tough.
Yeah.
It wasn't a cool place to live. It was just our place to live. And I grew up in a row of terraced houses, a little bit like what you see on Coronation Street, but not as nice. I had a mum and dad and 3 siblings. I was the youngest by 7 years. In the row of houses where we lived, in the street, I should say, there's probably about 148 houses, but many of those houses, maybe just under 20 of those households, were related to us.
Wow.
And then you have those aunties and uncles who aren't really aunties and uncles.
Yeah.
They just drink or rob or something with your dad. They're like extended family.
Yeah.
So that was the type of growing up in that environment.
And
Yeah.
was it common then that you had your family living on the same street? Because I mean, my family, in some respects, are miles away. But I always remember like TV shows like Bread, growing up, and it's like there was always sort of family members, and everyone was inside each other's houses. Was that what it was actually like?
I think so. That was my experience. I mean, things on TV are supposed to be entertaining or, in Bread's case, funny. And I know a lot of Liverpool people don't like Bread. They say it's
Okay.
exaggerated, but it is exaggeration.
Mm,
But that's what entertainment is, and humour when you exaggerate something. I thought it captured my Liverpool
mm.
that even though I grew up a little bit earlier than that.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you grew up
Plus,
in this street then,
well,
where you. Sorry, Dave. Go
I get
ahead.
a lot of hate mail now for saying that. But it was so. I was there.
The anti-bread brigade. It was, so yeah, that's fair enough. So you grew up. You've got this street where 20 of the houses is your family. I mean, that's a big old family in the 60s, growing up in the street. What was that like? Were you in everyone's house, or did you all kind of just ignore each other?
Um, well, everybody seemed to work, so everybody seemed to be out, and you get up and you listen. For me, I would go out on the street until I was called in for bed.
Okay.
Um, I think we have labels for everything today. I dread to think what labels I would have carried. But our family was as dysfunctional as the next.
Mm.
It was as broken and as damaged as the next. But as I got older, I found more grace for my mum and dad. I think they did the best as broken people, what little they had.
Yeah. They
Yeah,
So you say you found more grace for them because you. It's interesting, isn't it? I think about this, and I think as I've got older, and as I've had my own kids, and as they've got older, I think I've become more aware of my parents and actually more appreciative of them, if that makes sense, because you see it from their side a little bit more, don't you?
yeah. I mean, they call it sofa surfing now, or they did do a few years ago. A lot of my time was spent sleeping on the sofa or the floors of relatives' houses. It was a two up, two down. I've got two older brothers and a sister and a mum and dad. Where do they sleep?
Mm.
Frightening to think. And so I would end up on the sofa. My mum was my mum and dad we're very rough, but my mum was quite poorly at times, and I was a handful.
Mm.
I had behaviour problems, and Julie says I still do. Um,
Don't know what
and
she means. I don't know what she means.
so I was just out there doing my own thing, and I got well and truly damaged over the years. I got
Mm.
exposed to things that kids should never be exposed to, and I would vehemently want to protect my own children and my own grandchildren as much as I can from being exposed to those things.
Mm. And
Yeah,
did that sort of exposure obviously shaped you then quite dramatically as a kid?
it damaged me and broke me.
Mm.
Um, I was dysfunctional. I mean, occasionally went to school. It sounds funny as you get older. It sounds funny when you tell them the story. School was two streets away, both my primary school and my secondary school. And, I'd go in and get my mark and come home, from a very early age,
Mm.
it wasn't their fault. It was me. I was so hurt. It was really difficult to let anybody into my brokenness.
Mm.
And I was so as well,
Wow.
because people damaged me were relatives, and there were people who I would have thought would have cared for me. And it's not until you get older that you realise some of the stuff that you've been exposed to and the damage it's caused you.
Mm. Yeah.
But that's not you. I would
No.
say that would be of most of the people who I grew up with.
Mm. Yeah,
Mm.
and it's hard. Well, it's heartbreaking, isn't it? Especially when you watch it and see it from the other side. So here you are. You're a young, broken kid, growing up in the streets of Toxteth in the 1960s. You've got two brothers, a sister, a mum, and a dad, and you live in what we call a two up, two down. In other words, there was two bedrooms upstairs and
Yeah.
two rooms downstairs. For those outside of the UK, so you've got a house which is way too small for the family. You're sofa surfing in the 20 houses belonging to your family up and down the street. What started you on your faith journey? What kind of led you to start going down that road? How did that all come about?
Yeah, quite bizarre because I'm not aware of my mum and dad having any faith. I mean, we were really bad Catholics and exceptionally bad Protestants.
Okay.
And, you know, yeah, I don't remember. The only time I heard God was when it was, in some form of swear word. But I remember clearly, being at 8 years old and having pain in my heart.
Yeah.
I mean, I was at 8 years old. I was desperate.
Mm.
It wasn't. I'm not pointing a finger at anybody here. Broken people break other people.
Mm.
It's just the way life is. And I remember one Sunday afternoon walking down a road called Princess Avenue in Liverpool, or Princess Drive, and depending on which side of it you're on. And it was raining, and I seen all these kids queuing up. I thought to get out of the rain. I thought they were all trying to get into this old building on the corner, and I got in the queue, and it moved in quickly, and I didn't realize it was Sunday school. This colossus of a man put his hand on me, to which got a reaction from me,
Okay.
and to my a good one. And he
Yep.
said, "You're not." And a gentleman called Richard Woods, I didn't know him. He said, "I'll let him in." And basically, he turned to this man and he said, if the guy was called Ronnie, he said, "Ronnie, what colour's your Bible?" And he said, this guy looks at him and he goes, "Black." And Richard said, "Well, your Bible should be red. All Bibles should be red," as in R-E-A-D,
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
R-E-D.
Yeah.
And Ronnie was just looking at him as if this guy's crazy. He just shoved me through the door. And Richard said, "Why don't you want to as I'm sneaking in," Richard said to this guy, "Why won't you let him in?" He said, "Well, he was trying to set fire to the building the other day."
Which was true.
It was true, And anyway, I went down into the basements of this old church, and Richard was speaking. And I would have to say, at the age of 8, this guy preached on Gideon. And for the very first time in my life that I am aware of, I heard of hope and a future. And, a lot of people in my peers, even at a very young age, had been written off. Girls written off by society. The only thing I think most people would say would be guaranteed is that we'd end up either in jail, in prison, or some other crazy place. And I went for 3 weeks, Matt, and Richard spoke on Gideon for 3 weeks. And I can remember clearly each of those messages. I'm 65,
Wow.
That's a good preacher when you can remember
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Totally.
I still see this guy. In fact, he walked into the tab just before I had my last preach there. And every time we see each other, we just cry. And he was telling somebody after the service on the other Sunday, he was saying, I'm the only person who's ever cried at his preaching. And I did weep, and to The only time I would normally cry as a child would be when I was angry.
Yeah.
And I just heard something that never, it just formed something. It stirred something inside of me. It stirred that life doesn't have to go a certain way, that I'm not a mistake, which is something I'd heard a lot in my life, and that I was an afterthought, a mistake, blah, blah, blah. The story unravels. Not pleasant. But I did not think miraculous happened to me, besides seeds sown into my life. And I would see Richard through the years. I would see him, and he would always be affirming, and he's just a lovely guy, And he'd say, "I'm praying for you. I'm not giving up on you." But it wasn't until I got to my late teens, and as the years had carried on, I'd got even more broken, really. Thought I helped break people, to my shame. And my brother Mick, my younger brother Mick, he's my next brother up, I should say. I didn't really know my family that well, if I'm honest, because of all the sofa surfing. And he was a nice guy. I mean, I actually thought, he can't be my blood relative. He's far truly, but he'd become a Christian, and I didn't know too much about that, and. He got married to this lady who was like an angel. She was amazing. And they had some time passed by and they had a baby. And they said to me, "Oh, do you want to come and babysit?" Well, I would have to say, I'm probably in my very late teens then. And I wasn't in a good place. I had a bit of weed, bit of LSD. We're not in a fantastic place. And I'm like, they've invited me to babysit. Yeah, I'll do that. And I have no idea how I got there, because I don't remember them ever telling me where they lived.
Yeah.
But I got, and they were going out. They left at 6:00. They didn't have a TV. They only had Christian music, which sounded the same, playing it forwards and backwards. And I remember getting this. I think it was like a cot sheet and putting it on the floor, and I started to empty the drawers. But they didn't have a whole lot worth robbing anyway, if I'm honest.
Oh, so you were emptying stuff into the cot sheet to steal it?
Oh, you need to sort it out. You only want to take the good stuff.
Yeah, well, it's fair play, yeah.
I thought you were taking notes then. It's only worth stealing what you can sell, Matt. Your Honour. And it was bizarre, because I came across this book, and you're talking about, it's in the 70s, early mid-70s, and there was a book there, and it drew my attention to it because there was like what I thought was a semi-naked lady. I thought, "You dirty rascal." Anyway, I opened this book, and here's this book called Turned Unto Jesus by Arthur Blessed. Now, I can categorically say to you, man, I had never read a book in all the time I was at school.
Wow.
And I started to read this book. I think we would call it a God moment. I was desperately bored. So I started to read this book.
Yeah.
And the book was based in Sunset Strip in America.
Yeah.
And Arthur Blessed was like a missionary to this inner city group of people. And it was bizarre. There was people in there. And it was like he was writing about my friends on the street here.
Wow.
Did you have different names? And I wasn't a star, by the way. I was just like sort of in the ensemble somewhere,
Okay.
But I could recognize people, ordinary people, going through very similar things and brokenness like myself. And I think, some people say they found Jesus. Nah, they didn't. Jesus found them.
Yeah.
It is clear, and they heard, a scripture calls it, the gospel, and their lives, complex lives, started a new direction.
Yeah.
With the hope and purpose that I had when I was 8. For a decade it took for that seed to get anywhere. But
Wow.
these people got this hope and this purpose that I heard about when I was 8.
Mm.
Just to pull this bit to an end, and that was my brother came home with his wife and said, "What are you doing? You robbing me?" You know, I'm saying, "You've got nothing worth robbing." And his wife, who was gorgeous lady, she said, "What are you doing reading that book?" And I'm like, "I'm not reading the book." And she goes, "It's okay." I'm like, "Why would I want to read a book about Jesus?" I'm like,
Brilliant.
you know, I was undone. And, but the amazing thing, Matt, some people call it coincidence. Some of us just call it God. The guy who wrote that book was going to be in Liverpool the following Wednesday
No way.
in what was the boxing arena. And I went to that meeting. And shall I tell you a bit about that meeting, or do you want?
Yeah, no, go for it. Go for it.
I did go, Matt, because I was interested to see what this guy was like.
Yeah.
And I walked in, and it was a boxing arena. We had seats front and center, 3 rows from the front. These 2 dudes, hippies, playing the guitars, and I'm like, I was looked around and I could see people in there, and I thought, this is going to kick off big style. And then all of a sudden there's a guy in the boxing ring, and I'm like, he's starting, go guy, So I think I may have shouted something because I thought he was starting a fight. It was Arthur Blessed. It was the
Wow.
preacher man.
Wow.
And he starts to tell a little bit of the story of what God had called him to do in reaching these people. And I just have to say, I had so much hatred for this man. Every time he opened his mouth, I thought, I want to stab you, I want to hate you. And
Wow. Why did you have so much hatred for him?
I think he was just kept saying how much God and because God loved these people who were like me, that God had sent him to bring hope. And I think my brokenness was making me angry. And then I don't know how long he spoke for, but I was definitely at a tipping point of jumping in the ring, honestly. Not
Wow.
because I'm some big bad guy. I was just angry. I wanted to hate him.
Yeah.
And he said, "Okay, that's enough from me. I've told you about Jesus. I've told you that he loves you, and you're never going to be good enough to receive his love and forgiveness. None of us are." He says, "Well, I'm going to give you opportunity to receive Jesus into your life." And I thought, oh, this is just one of those big, freaky religious things. He says, as I'm talking, I'm going to count backwards from 3 to 1. And when I get to 1, you need to be here, and I'm going to introduce you to Jesus. He went 3, and I thought, no way is anybody so stupid to fall for this. People are moving.
No way.
And I'm like, what? I'm looking around, I can see people, from gangs who I was involved in moving forward. I'm like, it's going to kick off. He went 2, and I can still see people moving. Before he said 1, Matt, I was stood there.
Wow. Wow.
And I just thought, if this is real, this is maybe my only chance of finding some hope and purpose in life. And he talked about new beginnings. And if anybody ever needed a new beginning, I needed one. I knew my brokenness. I knew my lostness. And I went forward, and people came to talk to you. And this little Mr. Ben, honestly, had the black suit and tie. He'd next to me. And he introduced himself as Pastor Angel.
Oh, wow.
And I went, what? I said, are you for real? He goes, yes. And, wow, that's amazing. And he started talking to me. I can't tell you anything he said.
Okay.
And he said, we're going to pray now. We're going to invite Jesus into your life. And he was really affirming. He did annoy me because he kept calling me son. And I had no concept of that.
Right.
And he said, pray your prayer. I said, I don't know any. He says, you must know a prayer. I said, I don't know any. You really annoy me now, matey. And he says, well, just have a go. And I said to him, I only know one prayer. He said, that's the one. Okay? I said, God, if you can get me out of this, I'll do anything. And I mean, that's probably a sum total of my prayer. I think he was expecting the Lord's Prayer or something. And I remember him just looking at me very graciously and saying, no, that won't do. Maybe just pray this prayer after me. And I did. And, you know, I think I was expecting a flash of lightning. But I didn't hear one, you know. I didn't hear any thunder. And I remember this little man saying to me, he said, what do you think you've done tonight? And I said to him, I said, what I think I've done, I've said to God, if you're really interested in someone like me, if you really did die for somebody like me, I want to give you my life.
Mm.
And I know those words mean something now. But
Yeah.
even as I'm saying to you, I mean, the impact of them, you know, I am fully aware of. And I went home. And that's the hard thing, isn't it? Going back to the situation, you know, you've come out of. And I remember laying on my bed. And I remember saying, God, you know, really, 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 if you are interested in somebody like me, I want to have a go.
Mm.
And it's amazing how God brings people into your life, you know. And within days, I'd met Christians, and they invited me into their lives, and I started to grow. And you know, I was still broken.
Yeah.
My early years were a roller coaster, you know, loads of downs. But they stayed with me and they taught me. We talk about discipleship, and the folks listening, you know, if they've listened to any crowd church, we talk about discipleship a lot, you know. And another phrase for that is journeying together.
Mm.
And we started the journey, and I watched how they lived, and yeah, it was. I was so thankful that God put great people around me. Life was still tough. I'm thankful that any addictions that I had, that God miraculously broke straight away. You know, but I
Wow.
definitely had enough other baggage to be dealing with.
Yeah. Well, I've heard you say that before, that actually when you became a Christian, God set you free from addictions with medication and alcohol. And you stopped pretty much straight away, which is not everyone's story, but it's definitely your story, right?
Well, yeah, because the other end of that sentence is, you know, I really admire people who go through rehab. They learn things that I didn't learn. And I think for me, God set me free without anything was because I'm such a flake.
Okay.
You know, I was such a flake, and I was just so broken and damaged and whatever. I don't think I could have done a rehab.
Mm.
You know, I have total respect for people who do rehab, because in that you journey again with people and you learn so much. But for me, my learning was more as you go. You
More on
know,
the job. Yeah.
yeah, but you know, it was great that, you know, I just was able to stop drinking and doing stuff that I shouldn't have been putting into my body. You know, I mean, I wasn't some super heroin addict or whatever. You know, it just wasn't good.
Yeah. So, but I mean, so right at that. So you're in your late teens. You know, you're at this Arthur Blessed sort of event with Pastor Angel, which I think is one of the coolest names ever.
Oh, phenomenal.
Yeah, and you've obviously encountered God, and so God starts to work in your life by putting you around other Christians, by setting you free from a whole bunch of stuff. So does it all become sunshine and rainbows at this point?
I would have to say totally no.
Okay.
Totally. It's this, you start this adventure. I mean, it's great now. You have all, you know, when you been walking the journey for a while, you have all these words, but at the time it's a bit like, hello? What's happening here? Because I start to go home to Toxteth. There's parts of Toxteth that you can't walk through if you're white. There's parts of Toxteth you can't walk through if you're, black. It was very difficult.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's big racial problems going on. I mean, it was difficult. And you have to try and do life. And for me, I became really just aware of the Bible. I'd never read really, and I started to read the Bible, and I started to read these great stories about ordinary people and about God's plan for your life, and He has a purpose. So I remember Matt being sat in the back of a bus. I didn't leave school with a swimming certificate, okay? And I remember saying, I'm sat in the back of a bus, and I'm like, the only like religious things going on, I'm going to a prayer meeting. And I'm like, God, I've never worked up to this stage, by the way. God, give you my life, I'll do whatever you want. And Matt, as clearly as I'm sat on the back of that bus, I didn't hear, but I felt, I want you to be a nurse.
Wow.
I probably know a nurse, one nurse. And she was a fairly new friend.
Mm-hmm.
Well, friend might be a bit of an exaggeration. She probably walked past me once or twice in church. No idea what nurses do, really. So I go to this prayer meeting, and this girl was there, and I tell her what happened on the bus, and she looked at me as if, you might want to think again. I don't think you're going to cut it. So I just said, well, what would I do? So I said, well, you need to contact a school of nursing, but there's a big waiting list, blah, blah, blah. And this is the entry, what you need educationally. Okay. I don't even know what that means. Never mind, have it. So the next day, I rang the school of nursing. And as I'm talking, from a phone box, by the way. And,
yeah. Pre-mobile. Yeah.
Phone box. And I got through to the school of nursing, and I said, I don't know what to do here, but I'd like to be a nurse, please. And thinking she was going to say yes there and then, by the way. And she said, well, there's a 9-month waiting list for the school of nursing, and you have to have an entrance exam and blah blah blah. So I'm like, yeah, when do I start? And she goes, no, I don't think you understand. Well, the conversation did end quite abruptly on her part, but I forgive her. Matt, days later, I got a letter inviting me for an interview.
Wow. How many days later?
2.
Okay. Wow.
2 days. And I'm thinking, I've got nothing. All I own is a couple of T-shirts, literally 2 T-shirts, white T-shirts and a couple of pairs of jeans. I'm not sure if you're allowed to wear that for an interview to be in there. Doesn't give quite the right impression. And anyway, I got some clothes and I went, and they said, well, you need these qualifications. And I'm like, I want to be honest with you. I was going to lie, but I didn't. I said, I haven't got a swimming certificate. I haven't got a cycling proficiency certificate. And he said, well, what happened with school? So I said, well, we left by mutual agreement. They didn't want me, and I didn't want to go. And,
Okay.
they said, oh, right, okay. And there was no positive discrimination then at all, by the way. But somehow she must have took pity on me, and she said, well, you could sit this multiple choice exam and then have your interview. Well, apparently I scorched this multiple choice thing. I got it 100%. I didn't even know what most of those words meant.
Wow.
But I obviously did something right in the interview. But I remember in the interview, one of the interviewers was a tutor, and he said, "Dave, could I ask you a personal question? Do you have special needs?"
Wow.
And I'm like, I've never heard this phrase. I'm
Yeah.
like, I do, thinking it was a great thing. And he goes, "Well, I would be your tutor. I'm sure we might be able to get around that." And because I honestly didn't know what it was. And a couple of days later, there's a 9-month waiting list. I was told I was starting in the next school, which was 4 weeks later.
Oh, wow.
And I have to say, God blessed me with accelerated learning and gave me this great tutor who just happened to be a Christian.
Wow.
So, sometimes when God asks you to do things, or you feel God asks you to do things, and you feel totally inadequate, I have to say, if you read the Bible, he specializes in that.
Yeah. He's definitely on your side, right? That's his specialty. Yeah. I like that. Well, that's amazing. So you start nursing. So you have this encounter with God. You start nursing, despite not having any qualifications, not even a swimming certificate, or a cycling proficiency. You still can't swim. So, and you were a nurse, weren't you, for about 18, 19 years, somewhere around there?
Yeah,
and
I was.
And you specialised in children's nursing.
Yeah, in the last maybe decade, I moved to a children's hospital and was involved in children's nursing. Yeah, which was amazing.
Wow.
It was
yeah. So when God called you to nursing, he called you, right? There for 19 odd years.
Absolutely, it was a real vocation, and God gave me. I have to say, during those times in the early days, I did have some struggles, with my faith. Not that I didn't believe in God. It was just the lifestyles. There was a lifestyle clash again.
Yeah.
And I made some wrong decisions in those very early days. And for about 12 or 14 months, maybe a bit longer, I just was making bad decisions. And then I realized I just need to go for God or not go for God. And I decided to focus and quit messing around, as my wife would say.
Quit messing around. So
she wasn't my wife.
Yeah, I was going to say, wait, at what point in this story did you meet Julie?
I'd qualified nursing. We were going to a church in an area called Everton, and they used to have a great youth group, and that youth group used to do lots of sports activities. Julie used to play netball and hockey, and the guys used to play football, used to play in different leagues, and not leagues, tournaments. And that was great. That was a great way for late teens, early 20s to mesh together and learn. And so that was the early days. That was good to find some solid peers.
Yeah. So you met her at youth group, for want of a better youth group's the wrong phrase.
Yeah. And we found. Well, I think we'd met before I'd fallen away from God or was struggling. I think we'd met, and Julie was sort of, we're not going to date if you're going to mess around type of thing, she's like, let's get sorted.
Oh yes.
Yeah, and so we got married in early 20s, still nursing, but even then, I'd really felt a conviction that God was using my time while I was nursing to really lead a church, to be a pastor, to care for people.
Yeah.
And there's no finer thing than nursing, I would have to say. You're with people in the best moments and certainly in the worst moments. You know? And I loved nursing, even though it was difficult. I had great opportunities to share faith and to see God do some amazing things. But there came a time when I just knew this is the time now to plan to go, we call it full time.
Yeah.
I've done lots of studying, external studying in preparation.
So that must have been quite a seismic shift, right? I mean, just to sort of fast forward a little bit, so you obviously you quit nursing, you start a church, you meet Nick Harding along the way, you join forces.
Yeah.
What is now called Frontline comes out of that. I meet you for the first time in 1992, right? So 30 years ago. That's how long it was. I came as a fresh-faced student to Liverpool, and you were helping along with Chris and Graham on the Alive and Kicking mission. Do you remember this at the CU at university?
I remember.
We had Eric Delve there, and I'd just become a Christian at this point. And so I then stopped coming along to what was then called Bethany before it changed its name to Frontline, and got involved, and I've never looked back since. And it's been an epic journey. And so I know a little bit of your story, but throughout the time, right? What have been some of the key challenges that you sort of faced in life that God sort of helped you through this? You know, some of the big things you sort of had to face on that journey.
Yeah. I think for me, I love the idea of being on a journey. You know, as we read the Bible, you know, Jesus is walking here, or you got the disciples on the Damascus Road, and, you know, they're walking between places, and the stories, what they're walking from or walking to, may be different, but they're experiencing life together.
Yeah.
They're experiencing the highs and the lows. And I think some people feel that Christianity is for the weak. And you know what? They're probably right. I had to come to the end of myself, you know, and you know, and well, they might think Christianity is for losers. Count me in. But you know, it is real. You know, you're not removed from all that is going on around you. I believe that God walks with us on this journey through the day-to-day stuff of life, through the great blessings, you know, through births, through to deaths, through to illnesses. You know, as a pastor, you know, you talk about meeting you guys for the first time. You know, your generation of guys. It's been great to see coming through. Sorry, Matt, I'm laughing along. I'm not gonna, well,
That's fine. You laugh.
No, I'm not going to. I'm going to behave. And you know, just to see you grow, you know, from these young guys into real men, you know, and finding amazing wives, and vice versa, you know, and then seeing you with your own kids, you know, and I know, like, when we were in small group together, you know, even as a small group of men who used to meet weekly, we walked through some real difficult times together.
Oh yeah.
We remember praying for girlfriends and then wives, and then for children, and you know, even to see, you know, the loss of children in that group, and you know, and to see people bereft of that. It's a real journey, and God is, I would have to say, is faithful. And you know, even when we don't think He's there, because not because necessarily we feel Him, but because He said He'd be there. And He is the comforter. And so for me, highs and lows, I learn more. I'm wired. I learn more in the low than what I do in that. I take the high, you know, but I know that I learn more. I see who I really am. In those low times, I see being a Christian being a journey of walking with each other. I also like the word adventure. There's certainly nothing but, if you've got a mediocre Christian life, if any, you know, the folks watching this have a mediocre Christian life, you're missing out, because it's supposed to be an adventure.
Yeah, totally.
and walking with God is an adventure. You'll see things and do things that you could only read about in a book if you go for it with God. We've seen the miraculous. We've seen God provide very practical things. We've seen amazing healings, with a lady at the weekend, and we prayed with her 20 years ago when she had HIV, and
Wow.
she's completely healed.
Wow.
We've just seen so many amazing healings,
Yeah.
and yet we've walked through the valley of the shadow of death with people. It's part of life. So, I am thankful. I'm probably the most blessed person on this planet. That when we've gone through our highs, we're able to say thank you, Jesus.
Yeah.
And when those times have happened, to ourselves or to people around us, like as you mentioned, my nephew being murdered, somehow God reveals himself even in that pain.
Mm.
With God, there's no just get over it. God has something for the moment,
Mm.
and He's forever speaking, and He's forever caring, and I'm just thankful, Matt.
Mm.
I
That's really
am. I
powerful.
really.
Yeah, super powerful. I mean,
Mm,
I mentioned this at the start, and you mentioned it about Paul. For
mm,
those watching and listening, and I'm assuming it's going to be most of them, what actually happened there? Because it wasn't just a case of sort of
yeah.
gang warfare or anything, was it? That this was
This is
awful.
a. He was working as a carer at the time. He was raised in a Christian family. In his early 20s, was struggling with his walk with God. He's probably struggling more with the church, as the establishment. And he went off and he was doing his own thing. And then a few months before this incident, he came back to God, and he was really seeking God and loving God and reconnecting. And he had gone to visit a friend. I'll just give you the broad details. He'd gone to visit a friend. He was off the next day, if I remember rightly, and he's going to visit a friend to play some video games. And it was nearly midnight or whatever. And getting a visit from my dog. And he was off the next day, so we went to visit a friend, play some video games. And there'd been some shenanigans going on in the area with some guys causing trouble earlier. And he was going to his friends in a taxi, and he just said to the taxi driver, "Just drop me here. I can cross over the road and walk down the street." He got out of the taxi, crossed the road, and my understanding is that two guys ran past him and stabbed him, and I think they were craft knives, and they stabbed him and broke them off inside of him, and basically he bled to death within minutes.
Wow. Wow. And this is actually the son of Mick, who's your brother's house, where you had the cot sheet on the floor and reading the Arthur Blessed book, right?
Yeah, his mum and Paul's mum and dad, Mick and Lynn, they wrote a book. That I think you can get it on Amazon, called "Son of a Preacher Man," which tells their story, and it is quite amazing. This story.
It's a remarkable, and the stuff that's come out of it. I mean, we've featured some of their story actually on Crowd before, but the stuff that's come out of it has been extraordinary. But in the and as with all, I mean, it's easy to sit here in some respects and say, well, God can bring good out of bad situations. But when you're living in that's a very different scenario, right? So how did you deal with that at the time?
Well, I literally flew home. It happened when I was in America, and I flew home from America. My daughter Catherine had stood in, and she's a great resource, just fantastic, and she was just loving them and making space to be with them. And I came home and just said, what can I do? And really, it was just to be with them. And we talked, and we cried, and we cried, and we laughed. And then we planned a funeral. And that was quite helpful in the grieving process, I think, generally speaking. But some stories came out, and that was literally the night before Paul's death. He'd been at a bar playing pool with some friends, and there was a young lady there who they knew really well. Paul was engaged. His wife was away on mission. His fiancée was away on mission, and there was a young lady there who they just knew as a friend, and she was having a bad time. And basically, she left that bar saying, "I'm going home to commit suicide." And Paul followed her because he was that concerned. A number of people were concerned, but Paul followed her, and he was knocking on her door saying, "Look, let's talk." And she's like, "No, I'm just going to kill myself." And he said, "Well, I'm going to sit here all night talking to you," which is what he did.
Wow.
And this young lady told that story at his funeral. Oh, Paul had just stayed up all night to talk to her because he was concerned that she was going to take her own life.
Mm.
And that was probably one of the last things he did.
Wowzers.
And
that's an incredible story.
It is, so, our time here on this planet, it's very short and it's very fragile. It makes you not necessarily fearful, but it does make you realize, life is fragile. And we need to live it well. Recently, we've heard a lot said about the Queen, rightly, about life lived well.
Yeah.
And I would just say, life is shorter. It's shorter than any of us would want it to be.
Mm-hmm.
And more fragile. And we need to live it to the full and not waste it.
And how do you do that? How would you live it to the full? I mean, I appreciate that's a bit of a leading question, but I'll ask it anyway.
I think my honest answer, Matt, would be to go for God wholeheartedly. If you want to achieve something amazing, I've never done anything amazing in my life. I've never run a marathon. Julie has. You don't just decide to do it one day. There's lots of training involved, lots of sacrifice, lots of being focused on what you're doing. And I think being a Christian is like that. We need to be focused. We need to be determined. We need to be sold out on God and His plans and His purposes, and go for it. Stop trying to have one foot in the world and one foot in the kingdom, as we like to say. Let's be honest. Let's be real. People out there in the world, they've had enough. They know all the flaky stuff. They're looking for something that is authentic. And I would say this Jesus walk is so authentic, at times it just hurts. But you'll never be alone.
Yeah.
Purely because
So
He said that.
Yeah.
The only thing you count on is what God says in His word.
Mm.
And for me, from my early days of being a Christian, there's 2 places in the Bible that says this. God says, "I will never leave you or abandon you."
Mm-hmm.
That is flipping good news for me.
Yeah.
And I have to tell myself that over and over again. And, I'm not afraid to say there are times I have to tell myself that because I don't feel God with me. Like in that time, and there's been other times in my life I've not felt lovely feelings. I've not even wanted to be around other Christians at some time. But I have known of not being alone because God says in His word I will never abandon you,
Yeah.
nor forsake you. And I'm like, God can't lie.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I saw my life on, Matt.
Yeah. Yeah. No, powerful stuff, man. And I agree with everything that you said, other than the sentence, I've not done anything amazing. I feel like actually you have, in some major ways.
Of course.
There's very few people on the planet that have had the impact on my life that you have had. And, you know, I'm God's favourite, so it's got to be amazing, right?
That's obviously after me.
I'm just going to explain for those listening to the podcast before I close it out. We used to have this, do you remember, we used to have this thing about who was God's favourite, and we'd argue about it all the time. I'm God's favourite. No, I'm God's favourite. And I went and bought the domain name godsfavourite.com and just put a picture of me on it. So when you Googled God's favourite, it just came up with a photo of me. And I remember saying to you one day, Dave, see, that Google says it's me, so it's got to be right.
Obviously, it came through Wikipedia, that statement.
Oh, it's funny, the banter. And before anybody writes us, yes, we know God has no favourites. But that's okay.
Friends.
Say that again, sorry.
Bible tells us we are friends of God.
Yeah, it does. It does. I'm his best friend. Yeah. There are some friends that you have, and then there's your real friends, and I'm one of them. Yeah. Love it. Absolutely love it. So, Dave, listen, thank you. I'm aware of time, and I feel like we're just starting to scratch the surface a little bit, really. If people want to reach out to you, if people want to get hold of you, connect with you, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, there's a number of ways, Matt. You can track me down on Facebook, and you'll go to Dave Connolly. And when you open that up, you'll see it says God Seekers UK, or you can email me at godseekersuk@gmail.com, or you can go to a really new, exciting website which tells you a little bit about some of the things that I'm doing at revivemerseyside.org.
revivemerseyside.org. That's fantastic. And we will, of course, link to all those links for Dave in the show notes, which you can get for free along with a transcript and notes at crowd.church, www.crowd.church, or direct in your inbox if you signed up for our newsletter. Dave, listen, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast, man. Thanks for sharing your story. Love you loads. Think you're awesome. And it's just been absolutely brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah, bless you, Matt. Lovely to see you.
So there you have it, another fantastic conversation. Huge thanks again to Dave for joining me today. Remember to check out Crowd Online Church at www.crowd.church. You'll get to hear Dave speak in a few weeks, and there's some of his talks already on there which you can also check out. And just check it out. Even if you might not see the point of church, Crowd Church is a digital church on a quest to discover how Jesus helps us live a more meaningful life. We are a community, a space to explore the Christian faith, and a place where you can contribute and grow, and you are welcome at Crowd Church. Be sure to subscribe to What's the Story wherever you get your podcasts from, because we've got some great stories lined up, and I don't want you to miss any of them. And in case no one has told you yet today, let me do this. You are awesome. Yes, you are. It's just a burden you have to bear. I have to bear it. Dave has to bear it. We're fearfully and wonderfully made, and that is good news. Now, What's the Story is produced by Crowd Online Church. You can find our entire archive of episodes on your favorite podcast app. The team, the wonderful team that makes this show possible, is Sadaf Bainon, George McQuaig, Josh Catchpole, Estella Robin, and the mighty Tim Johnson. Our theme song has been written by Josh Edmondson, and if you would like to read the transcript or show notes, as I said, head over to the website www.crowd.church, where you can also sign up for our newsletter and get all of this good stuff direct to your inbox, totally free, totally amazing. So that's it from me. That's it from Dave. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a fantastic week. I will see you next time. Bye for now.